are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blasey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and this is episode number 14. Today, I have a Michigan hunter on here. His name is Brandon Leon. He's only 19 years old. He's relatively new to hunting. You know, he's only been hunting for a few years, but he has a story that is probably one of the more crazy stories I've ever heard. As far as shooting the biggest deer of his life in Michigan, only on about 10 to 12 acres, to having to leave it overnight, and then having a crazy story with the butcher when he takes it to get processed. So you really got to stick around to listen to this one. It's pretty crazy. This week I'm down in Tucson, Arizona at PSC Archery with Bobby Vargas and Blake Shelby. So taking a tour of the plant and doing some video work down here. I'm also going to be recording a podcast with Bobby while I'm down here. So PSC's a really awesome company, a lot of cool people, and they make a really good quality bow as well. And I've been shooting them for a long time. I'd say for the last 8 years I've been shooting a PSC. So nothing really new on the deer front for me. I'm just going to keep glassing from afar and making sure Jeffrey and all of his buddies like Jim Abbott and Bomb Pop, all those deer are sticking around. Stay the heck out of there, but I'm going to glass from a distance. So other than that, I got a couple stands to hang on another piece of property. I just don't have a lot of time right now with work and family, so I'm trying to balance that. But other than that, that's all I got. So I'm going to get Brandon on here, and I hope you guys enjoy this. And here we are. We're back for another podcast on the Fall Podcast, episode 14 to be exact. And today I've got another Michigan native with me, Brandon Leon from Howell, Michigan. Brandon, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Hey, it's raining up here right now. I don't know if it's raining down by you. We just got a little stint coming through, and we need it for sure. It's kind of dry up here, and it's just that time of year. We just need the crops to keep growing, and the rain is a good thing, as Luke Bryan would say.
Yeah, right, of course. Yeah, it's been pretty wet here for the past few days. Really this whole week's been kind of wet for us, but it's good. It's definitely good.
Yeah, for sure, man. And before we get too far, you wanna break down yourself a little bit for everybody that doesn't know you, kind of let everybody know where you're from, how old you are, and maybe what you do for a living.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Brandon Leon. I'm from Howell, Michigan. I am 19 years old. I'm a full-time college student. So I work just a basic part-time job at Under Armour. I played college baseball this past year, and going back and forth from hunting and baseball was definitely quite the adventure, driving 70 miles back and forth. But that's just me right there.
Very cool, man. So you're 19. You're fresh out of high school then, right?
Correct. Yep. My freshman year was this past year.
Okay, cool. So how'd the baseball season go for you?
So I actually wasn't able to play. So I've broken my foot 6 times in the past 5 years, unfortunately, my right foot. And in August, I had to have a surgery. And that definitely knocked me pretty hard. And then in January, I had to have another surgery, so I wasn't able to play. And unfortunately, the school wasn't necessarily the right fit for me. 0 of my credits ended up transferring anywhere after the first semester. So I ended up having to leave that school, went to community college next semester, went to community college this summer, and just had my final today. So finally done with that. Then I start school. Not sure exactly when, because I'll either be at Michigan State or I'll be at Lansing Community College for another semester. But that's where I'm going to be right now. Not sure if I'm going to try to play baseball again next year, but we'll see.
That's crazy. How did you broke your ankle 6 times? How did you end up breaking it?
So, well, it's been I haven't broken the ankle. I've broken just like literally every bone pretty much in my foot. The first time I broke it, believe it or not, it was on a home run, stepped on second base and it cracked
Oh my
right in the heel.
gosh.
Swear to God, cracked right in the heel. And then about 8 months later, it was just another crazy thing. Like running from second to third, and a bone just snapped. And I couldn't. It's just my foot structure. I was born with it, and once I turned 13 is when everything kind of started, happening. And then another time I was like just at Sky Zone for the first time ever. Wasn't there for 5 minutes, and just a trampoline park, and 5 minutes there, and rolled it, and it ligament tore bone off. And then another time this summer, it just pushing off, and it fractured real bad, and ended up having to get a pin put in. And I think I was missing one more, but it's just been a whole roller coaster. It's been healthy for 6 months. So I get through the high school season, have a good high school season, and then either break it in the fall, or I break it during the high school season, and break it in the summer. It was just back and forth, left and right. So
Wow, man, that really sucks.
yeah, for sure. But I still definitely want to play. So we'll see. I don't know. I might try it next year. I don't know. I gotta get healthy. So
Yeah, for sure. And and you're still young too. I mean, I'm sure you probably heal up pretty quick, like you said, but you just never
Yep.
know what might happen 6 months from now either.
Exactly. So I gotta look in my future. So
Yep.
we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, so today, for everybody listening, I tracked Brandon down on Instagram, and you killed a really good deer last year in Michigan, and I
Yeah.
believe it was only on, what'd you say, 9 acres?
There's about 9-10 acres of land. Yep.
Okay, so before we get into that, I got a couple things I want to rattle through a couple things, and we'll get into that briefly. But just to kind of tease everybody there, it was roughly 140-inch deer and on 9 acres here in Michigan, and it's a pretty cool story. I've heard a little bit of it off record, so before we get into that, I'm kind of interested in how did you start hunting, and who was your biggest influence growing up, and who got you into hunting?
Mm-hmm. So when I think I was 7 years old, and I remember it vividly. My dad came home after a trip up north with a doe in the bed of the truck, and to me, it just was the coolest thing ever. And I just vividly remember, having the meat from it. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like it's the best meat I've ever had in my life. And that kind of started it. So like after that, I just kept saying, Dad, take me hunting with you. Dad, take me hunting with you. And you're saying like you're a little too young right now. But when I turned 9, or no, when I was 7, so like, he got my first bow when I was 7. And I would shoot it in my backyard just all the time. Absolutely loved it. I mean, I would shoot just for hours and hours and hours, just, shooting like a little deer target. And that's just what got me hooked. And, he finally took me on my first hunt when I was 9 in Coldwater, Michigan, on a 500-acre farm that his buddy had. And I mean, it just ever since then, I've been hooked.
So was your dad, was he a bow hunter as well, or was he a gun hunter, or did he do it all? Was he a pretty hardcore hunter?
He didn't get into hunting until he was about 25. My papa, his dad, was a big pheasant hunter. He was always out in the fields doing pheasant hunting, but my dad wasn't able to really do that growing up a lot. And then when he got into, I think when he was in his mid-20s when he started getting into hunting, and it was gun hunting. So he would go all the way up north, and he hunted up north for, 20 years, and he only killed 2 deer.
Oh, really?
He never found them. And it was just hunting camp up there. He'd go with a whole bunch of buddies, and they just have a good time. So I don't know if they were actually hunting or if they were just, partying out there. But, they said they'd always see them, but they'd just be way, way out. And, he only came home with a couple deer. But once I turned, gosh, I want to say 12, because I think that was the legal age I could hunt with a bow. I think it was 12 years old. There was a place out in Pinckney where one of his buddies had a farm, and that's where I started the youth hunt. And the deer there was for 2 years. It was amazing. Like, you would see literally 30 deer every single night. It was insane. And I ended up shooting a doe out there, and it was it got me hooked. It was my first kill was with a bow. So, it was awesome.
How old were you when you killed your first deer, and was it with a bow or with a gun?
My first deer was with a bow, or I'm sorry, it was with a muzzleloader. It was a
Oh,
muzzleloader in
okay.
cold water. Yep.
And how old were you when you shot that?
I think I was 13 or 14. I think I was 13.
Okay. And that's some of the best memories that I can remember. I'm older now. I'm 31, so I killed my first deer with a bow when I was 12. It was a
Hmm.
doe, and I'll never forget it. That has to be a lasting memory.
Oh, for
What
sure.
was the scenario? Were you with your dad or were you by yourself?
Yep. So I was with my dad. So it was in cold water, like I said, and we the previous night we got there and we got there late and we were just walking around trying to find a spot to go. We ended up setting up a blind on the corner of this like I mean it had to been, I think it was like a 30-acre field. And we're walking in and I'm like, hey dad, and so you're walking in and there's this first field. You have to walk through this giant first, it's like a 200-acre field to get to the second field, which is about a 40-acre field where the blind was set up. So we're walking down the trail to get in through the middle of this field, and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, why don't we just set up like right on off to the side?" And he's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to lay off to the side." Like, so I was laying prone the entire time, and my dad's literally sitting up against a tree. And I mean, looking back on it, like I can't believe how it worked out because I mean, I had like grass going up about maybe a foot, like a foot above my head. But my dad's like, he's like he's a buff guy, and like he's not like he's pretty easy to see from like 200 yards away. So, so he's literally sitting up against this tree, and it was 9:12. I remember the exact time because I had my phone laying right next to me because I was like tying little grass and knots, just trying to keep myself occupied for the time. I look up and I think I see some. I get through my scope, and there's two does. And I'm like, I start freaking out, of course, because my giddy self's like, oh my God, I'm gonna kill my first deer. They're like 200 yards away. So I'm like, Dad, there's two does out there. There's two deer. I don't know what they are at first. I'm like, there's two deer. He's like, where? And I'm like, directly in front of us across the field. And so he sees them. They're like, okay, here they come. So now they're coming across the field, and it's 200 yards exactly from where we are. From one side of the field to the other side of the field. So they start coming across, and I'm, heart's racing. Like I can't believe like this is happening. It's like a dream come true. They're just running across the field directly towards us, and they get from like 150. My dad's like 150, 130, 120, and then once they get to about 115, he's like, all right, cock your hammer. So I, drew it back and waited for the biggest one to give me a shot, and you know, fired away and ended up running. I drilled it too. I don't know how I ran this far, but it ran about 200 yards and I ended up just piling over and right in the field. So I mean, it was an incredible experience.
That's really cool, man. And then I'm
Yeah.
sure that even nailed the coffin even more on how hooked you were with hunting and
Oh, for sure. Yep.
yeah. So, did you play any more sports in high school then?
No, baseball was all I played. I wanted to play football, but I never pulled the trigger on it. So
Okay, so your falls, yeah, so your falls were pretty wide open then, so you could hunt. So what was your hunting like in, through high school?
so so from I'll start from like freshman year. We did not have really anywhere to go. We would go to like Imlay City. You know where that is? Kind of up by like Bad Axe, that
Yep,
area
yep.
ish. So my dad had a family friend out there, or not a family friend, but like a work friend out there, and they had about 90 acres. And every single time I went there, it was just impossible to see deer. Like if you went up there for 4 days and you saw two deer, it was like that's awesome. I mean, it was just impossible to hunt. It was about I want to say it was like 70 acres of woods, and I mean, like the terrain was just so like it was like all like the ground was just hilly, 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 and it was so hard to find deer and see deer, and that's where we hunted for a long time because we stopped hunting in Pinckney when I was in like eighth grade. I want to say it was like eighth grade because the deer just vanished and we could never find them anymore out there. And the owner's son started getting into hunting, so we ended up just leaving it to him. And then sophomore year, um, no, it wasn't sophomore. I think it was my junior year. Yeah, it was my junior year. I found one of my buddies. He's in Texas now. He's in the rodeo. We're doing it's like steer wrestling, I think it is, or
Yep.
I'm not sure exactly what it's called. I think it's this is the one where you wrestle the steers. He invited me to hunt out at his place because he doesn't bow hunt. I was at this point I was kind of like hooked on bow hunting. I'd shot a couple deer with the bow, all does. Still that day had not shot a buck, and that's where I found this property that I currently have, and I hunted out there for the whole year, sophomore year. I saw a ton of deer, but I didn't shoot anything. Didn't see any bucks that I was interested in shooting. And then junior year comes along, and I figured out the property a little bit. I hung a stand right in the corner of the field and ended up shooting my first buck, which was a 2-year-old 8-point. And that was my first deer. I mean, I passed that deer, like I told you a little earlier, the other day. I had passed this deer, like this type of deer, so many times because I always wanted to shoot, like like what you see on TV.
Yep.
I wanted to see like one of those mature deer, and I always wanted to just, save, just wait out, see what happens. And this deer gave me a shot, and it was awesome how it went down. Just popped out of nowhere and shot him at 29 yards.
So the property that you were hunting and you shot your first buck on, was that the property that you shot the buck last year on?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit to your junior year. Let's talk about this property. Let's break the property down.
For sure.
Tell me everything, what it consists of, the acres, how much woods, what's the tillable, what are the features around it, and what is it, flat, is it hilly? Give me everything you can. What does it look like?
For sure. All right, so the property, at least the part where it's huntable, the other part is like it's like a rodeo station, kind of like they have horse barns and just gated all the way around up there where they do their thing. And then in the back, it's literally the majority of the property is about 5 acres of field. I mean, it's just a grass field too. It's not like it's like anything crazy. Like there's no they're not growing anything back there. They occasionally grew hay back in the day, but
okay.
it's just a grass field, and there's 2 little islands right in the middle.
What are the islands like? What are they? Are they thicker?
They're just trees. They're just trees with like little, just like grass around them.
Okay.
And some brush is what it is. And so, that's basically, and then in the back, in the back of the property, there is, it's thick swamp. It's, just perfect deer habitat to, for them to run around and just grow and be untouched. And then beyond that, it's state land. It's untouched state land where you literally need a jet boat to even get into the property or get into the area that I hunt. And that's really the property right there. It's very basic.
Now, going from the main road, do they live on the property there, like right up close to the road? And then like that's where all the cattle barn and everything, and then it goes back to like the grass field that's 5 acres with a couple islands, and then it goes back to the swamp where you say it's really thick, and then that butts up to a big piece of state land. Now, does that state land get hunted a lot from a lot of other people?
So during bow season, no. I drive past it where everyone would park, and there's never any cars there.
Okay.
However, when gun season comes around, there's definitely people there. But I hunted it one time, the state land one time, and it was, where the people were setting up, it's just such a small block of woods that like there was like 3 people around me, and I to this day I vowed I just never would go back because it almost just didn't seem safe, with all the people that were out there.
So now, does this property have any food on it whatsoever? Is there oaks, acorns, apple trees, anything like that? Like, what are the deer eating?
The deer are eating. So a lot of time I'm seeing them eating just the grass out there. They're really just coming into the field and they're just chowing down out there. There is acorn trees into a little block of timber. There's a small block of timber. As soon as you walk out, there's acorns. And then there's a walnut tree that is directly in front of one of my main stands, about 7 yards in front of me, but they really never touch them. So,
Okay.
a lot of time I'd put out corn, and that's where a lot of them they would fill, that would attract them, and they would all then they would just go throughout the field,
Yep.
and they just gnaw on the grass and whatever they could find out there.
So are you putting out trail cams and trying to hone in on deer and just try to figure out what's there? And what do you do for that? Like in the summer, are you just running
Right.
cameras and figuring out what's there?
Yeah. So right now we have 3 cameras out right now. I have not checked them yet. They've been out for about 2 weeks. However, last year what I did notice was, so we had this I think it was, August 17th was the first time we had a shooter buck come onto the property, an 8-point.
And what are you guys? What are you saying is a shooter? Is he a age structure? Is he a 2.5, 3.5,
He's a 3.5,
Okay.
and he's about 130.
Okay.
I think he's actually on my. I think I posted a picture of him on my Instagram a while back.
Okay.
And we only got one picture of him. The deer don't live on the property; they pass through the property. It's
Yep.
a gateway. It's a passageway, is what the property is, and it's just located in the most perfect spot, in my opinion, where the deer can they literally live on the state land, and it's thick. Untouchable. They live there. They come out to this field where I'm at, and then they go into the other field, which is the neighbor's field, but they don't hunt very often. At least I didn't hear them, about them getting anything this past year, and they feed out in the cornfield on their property. So, yeah, that's basically how they go through there.
So what's the topography like? Is it really relatively flat, or is there a couple elevation changes at all?
It's relatively flat. The field is once you get to the back of it, it evens out pretty well. On the front, it's a bit hilly, but nothing, like, it's just one nice little divot, and that's pretty much it. And then it flattens out to where the main stands are hung.
Okay, so what kind of basically structures, or what are you looking for to hang your stands? Are you looking for like where the swamp meets the the oak woods or whatever it is? Are you looking for an edge? Are you looking for a pinch point? Like, what does that consist of? Are you setting up on primary scrape areas, or what are you looking for when you're hanging your stands?
So on this property, what I found is all of the deer come to the field from one spot, 1 and 2 spots. Only one spot's huntable because the wind is just constantly blowing to the southwest. And I'm setting up on trails. You can see it through the grass where they've been constantly going in and out. And this is for early season. So early season, what I found until about October 20th on this property, they are constantly coming into this field. They're like in the feeding pattern, or whatever you want to call it. They're just going in, and they're feeding, and then they're gone. Once the rut comes, what I found is they're deep in the swamp. They're chasing out there. They very rarely come to the field, and that's when I have to really move around. I have to walk back there and find out, where are these new trails coming in, because this was the first year I really figured it out. At least it turned out to have good success, and saw a lot of shooter deer on this property, and that's basically how that went down.
Okay, so when you're hunting at early season, since it's such a small piece of ground, are you only being able to hunt it on certain winds, or do you have stands set up for every different wind?
So we have 3 stands hung up, and for the main field, we have one set. We have literally 2 stands set directly across from each other. One for the southwest wind, one for the northwest wind, and then we have a third one in the other patch of timber, which it really didn't. It was hard to see deer there. The wind was always perfect, and it looked really good, and it was set up on spots where there's trails. The deer they never came out during that time. We only got a few pictures of deer in that area that were, and they were all the same deer. Like we'd see the same deer, like pictures from the field, we'd get them in the woods, but they would be much more consistently in the field than in that part of the woods. So we had to, that was basically how we had to do that.
I see. And when you're going out there to hunt, let's say it's still early season, you said you basically know what their pattern is. They got a pretty distinct pattern for their first 20 days of season.
For sure.
What are you, what do you set up? You're just looking for passerbys basically, right? You're intercepting them coming from, bed to food maybe, because didn't you say the neighbors have corn usually or beans, and and you're just kind of intercepting them. Now, when do you decide to make that transition from that stand to maybe your rut stand? Is it, do you let it sit for a couple days where you're like, okay, I'm not seeing the deer like I thought I was, maybe I got to move then? So how does that scenario play out?
So how it first played out, I got to go back to my junior year. So I shot that 8-point on the 5th day of the season. And after that, I didn't, there's still good deer activity. I mean, you see deer 15 deer every single night. I mean, they're everywhere, but you wouldn't necessarily see the bucks. And so I'm sitting in my stand. I'm literally, like, if you can picture it, sitting on the stand, we're looking directly forward, the fields to your right, and then there's hardwoods to your left. I mean, you're literally on like this, the point where it separates the two. I started looking to my left a lot, and I would start seeing deer way out in the swamp, but I could never tell what they were. And you could just see them, moving back and forth. And that's what really, I started like getting interested, like what's back there? Cause I mean, these deer are like 300 yards away, but I can consistently see them. So I was like, well, I'm not really seeing a ton of deer here, or at least the deer I want to see. So I use a climbing tree stand, I use a summit. And I just was like, well, I might as well, pack this up next day and go way out there and see what I can see. And on the very last day of bow season was when I actually moved out there in 2016. So this is the first, this is my second year on the property. And I put a note down in the app. It was Scout Look. And I had the greatest night I had ever had in a tree stand. And I didn't see a single deer. I mean, you could hear the deer just running through the water everywhere. I mean, just constantly the entire night from like 4 to, 7. I mean, just they were, sprinting, bucks were chasing, and I just couldn't see them. They were no more than 80 yards away. And at the very last light, I was like, well, I gotta try to make something happen. So I started grunting, and I had a deer literally, I mean, I could hear it coming from 40 yards away, 50 yards away, and I never saw it, and it probably came to about 20 yards from me. I to this day don't know what it was. And I that was what started, okay, the swamp is where it's at for the rut, and then the early season they're looking for the food right now. So the field is kind of where we figured out, okay, until about the middle of October, that's where we want to be. And then in the swamp, towards the end of the year, that's where we want to be.
Okay, so basically, in somewhat way, your field stand also acts as a observation stand as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, you've got a pretty good problem there, because you can sit from afar, and that's how I kind of like to hunt. I like to sit from afar in a way. My observation stands, I like to get off a little bit just so I can see, and then I like to kind of move in. I like to hone in and try to figure out, but now that's kind of what I do more of, like out of state. I do some out of state hunting. Michigan, I'm a little more aggressive, but in Michigan on my farms, I will sit back from maybe a truck and just glass a little bit once I know the deer's there, and then I really move in. So you moved in on, in the swamp in 2016, and that was the year you killed that 8-point, right?
Yep, that was the year I killed that 8-point. I didn't move back there until literally the last day of bow season. Okay,
so you killed the 8-point early, and then you moved back there.
Yep, and I only saw a couple 6-points, some 4 corns, and a real goofy 5-point.
Okay.
And, I didn't see any of those. They were still moving around, but I mean, the activity it died down a little bit.
Okay, so were you running trail cams that year?
No, I did not run trail cameras that year.
So you
2017 was the first year I ever ran trail cameras anywhere.
Okay, so coming out of the 2016 season's over.
Mm-hmm.
Winter's gone. Coming to
Right.
spring, what is your game plan? What are you thinking that you have to do to really hone in on these deer? And what made you think you needed to get a trail cam, basically?
Mm-hmm. So come senior year, or I'm sorry, or this year, I apologize. This year, this was the first year my dad was able to hunt the property. My buddy went down to Texas, and his grandparents I became very close with. They're like, yeah, for sure, go out and hunt. You guys are welcome to whenever you want. And my dad was the one that really got me on the trail camera idea. I mean, like I'd always been down for it, but I didn't think of it at the time. And so me and him got a couple cuttybacks, and we put them out at the very beginning of August, and we let them sit for about 2 weeks, and we started seeing some there was some deer out there that this year, if they're there, they're going to be studs. I mean, there was an 8-point last year we had. It was a 2-year-old, and I mean, it's super tall. His G2s are probably 6 inches, 7 inches, a 2-year-old, and just super narrow. And that was the first deer we saw that we was consistent, buck wise. That was consistently on the property. We whenever you pulled a camera or a card, you knew you were going to have that deer.
Did you guys ever see that deer during season and have any encounters with him?
No, didn't see him one time. So come, what day was it? I think it was August 23rd or something like that. It was like a week before I got my surgery. I get one picture of a bachelor group of bucks, and there's what to me is the biggest 8-point I've ever seen in the wild. He's probably he's pushing 130, and I couldn't believe it. That was my first realized, wow, there's actually some deer out here.
Mm-hmm.
And he vanished until October 8th, and then I got my first picture of him. And he hung out until about October 20th, and then October 18th is when we got the first picture of the 10-point that I killed. I was away at school, and I get a text from my dad, and he's like, check this guy out. And I couldn't believe it.
Okay, I gotta stop you. So we gotta go back.
Yep. Okay, my apologies.
No, you're fine. So the 8-point that you got a picture of. So you said he showed up in a bachelor group in August, and then he was gone until the 8th. So now what?
Never got a picture of him.
Okay, so what is you and your dad's trail cam strategy? Are you checking them every day? Are you checking them once a week?
Every 5 days. 5 days.
Okay.
5 days.
And are you putting them, by the spots where you're hunting?
Yep. So the first one that we put out in 2017 was directly at the stand where I killed that 8-point the previous year. So right on the field edge. And it's about, I think it's about 25 yards, 20 yards from the stand. And then the other one is in a block of timber where there's another stand, but we just never saw deer during there. But we'd always get pictures at night of, that's where we got the first picture of that 8-point was in that stand. But you never see any deer during the day. I mean, it was just dead. I mean, tons of turkey, but everything but deer.
Okay, so was this deer daylight? Did you have any daylight pictures of him, or was he all nocturnal
not a single
after?
One.
Okay, so and the reason why I ask is because I've hunted some smaller tracts of land, and I was the same way as you were. I was putting my cameras right by my spots where I was hunting. I was going in there once a week at least and checking them. And this year I've really toned back on that and just laid off the pressure. And I've said it before in some of my podcasts that I'm just getting inventory. I don't care if the pictures are after dark or whatever
That's
it is.
Exactly how we were.
Yeah, as long as I know the deer are there, my stands they will produce. I just gotta hunt them. So that's why I ask. Now, do you think your guys' pressure, checking that camera, hunting a little bit, made that deer stay nocturnal? I mean, did you ever, from the 8th till the 20th, ever get a daylight picture of them?
We never got a daylight picture of them. The stand, I mean, it's super easy to get into. I mean, you literally walk the side of the field and you walk into the woods about 5 yards and you're in the stand. So I don't think pressure was necessarily the problem. I just think I think it was just the deer's pattern. I mean, we didn't get them every single day. We literally got him October 8th, and then he vanished for, about a week. And then all the other deer, I mean, they would hang out there.
Yep.
We'd still see this tall 8-point, that tall 8-point, which I'm hoping is still alive this year. And if he is, I think he's gonna be a really cool deer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple other 8-points that we had in the property that we're really hoping to get through. But I think they're just the deer's pattern, honestly.
Yeah.
Because, we put up cameras all over the place, and we really couldn't find them.
Yep. So, and that kind of tells me that deer was probably obviously not living on you, and he was always coming from a ways away. He was living probably on that state land, and if he was getting there at midnight or whatever, he was living a ways away. He knew that if you guys had bait out or something, he knew that was there, and he knew that he was safe to get in there. So I would think that's probably why he was doing that. Yeah. So basically, he vanished on. Did you say the 20th of October? Then
he vanished about the 25th. Was roughly the last time we got a picture of him. And that was when. And then October 18th is when the 10-point, the Big 10, is what we called him, showed up. We got the first 3 pictures of him.
Now, was he on that same camera?
He was on all of our cameras. He was on both the 2 cameras we had out. We only had 2 cameras in 2017. 2 cameras. That was it. 2 cutty backs.
And was he on? Was he daylight?
He was daily. Every single night he was in the field. He came. The first picture we got of him, first 3 we got of him, was in the woods, and which was shocking to us because we never saw. You never really had a lot of deer there, and that's where he first came out. And then after that, he found his way to the field, and literally, I mean, every single night he was there from 9 to about 2:33 in the morning. He would come in and out, and he would be with the 8-point at times. He was with, like, the 8-point would. There's these pictures I have of him just backing him off. I mean, like, he'd walk him off, and then he'd come back in.
Yep.
The 8-point would just circle around the back, and and then after that time, I mean, probably the dominance of that deer just pushed the 8-point off, and
yeah,
we'll see if he comes back this year. But
so now the 10, we're talking about the one that you ended up killing, right? The 10.
Yep.
So
the Big 10. Yep.
Yep. So he always, what I like to do is when I get a deer that I like to go after, especially on camera, and I try to find any sort of pattern I can on the deer. So was he coming from a certain side of the camera every time and leaving a certain way?
So that was the challenge we had with him. It was weird how he would always come in. So a lot of the time he would come from directly in front of the camera as we would get the pictures. And that's where a lot of deer do come from, but it's not where we expect them to come from every single time. So it was hard to tell if he's actually living on the neighbor's property or if he was looping around, like he was coming from the woods and he'd loop around to the front of the camera and walk in from the middle of the field to where, we would get pictures of him. And then it was just a patterning thing. Like that's where I remembered, like, okay, what notes did I take from last year? Because I mean, like, literally in 2016, I put every deer I encountered into the Scout Look app, and I would mark like where they came from and what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And that I just looked in my notes and I was like, I saw, like, I remembered, like, from 2015, like, I had that night in the swamp where I didn't see a single buck, single deer, literally no deer, but I just heard them all. And I was like, well, maybe he's coming from out there, because we just didn't have access to the property. It was the neighbors, and he wasn't able for us to get access. So that was the only other option we had, was to go into the swamp where I saw all this running activity, or at least heard it. I didn't see anything, literally nothing. And that was kind of the start for that.
Okay. So yeah, because in 16 I killed a buck on opening day of bow season. He was a 3.5-year-old. He was right at 120 as a 7-point. Well, he was an 8-point, but he broke off, so it was 120 as a 7-point. But he was a 3.5-year-old. And the last couple of days of September, there's a website called Weather Underground. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No,
so basically, you can go to it and you can pull up any historic data from any day. So when I went and pulled that camera on October 1st morning, it was raining that day. I hunted that morning, and I figured it'd be a good time to go in and check this camera. I checked it, and he was on there, and he had been on there for like the last week, but it was there was daylight and there was night. So I'm like, I go back home midday and I'm like, I got to try to find a pattern on this deer. Well, the only thing I could figure out was every time he would come in by the stand in daylight, it was it was either a northeast or an east wind, and he was coming from the east. So his wind literally was at his back. So I knew there was bedding to my east, and everything that I've kind of learned and experienced myself is if a deer is walking with his wind to his back, basically, he feels like he's very comfortable in that scenario.
Right.
Like
Right.
he's been there, nothing has pressured him. So I figured I had a very killable deer. So
Mm-hmm.
the luck would have it that night I had a northeast wind, which was kind of an iffy wind for me, but
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up showing up at 12 after 7, and I shot him
Mm-hmm.
right downwind of me at 18 yards, and it was awesome. So literally that's the only deer I've ever been able to pattern somewhat in Michigan.
Right.
But so that's kind of what I was like wondering, were you trying to get some
Yeah.
sort of pattern on him, and ultimately what did you get on him where you knew you could go in and get him then?
Right. So, like I said, I mean, he was every single night he was there. I mean, it was from 9 to literally 3 a.m. every single night at the field. And I just, you keep getting these pictures, and, the property is just not that big. So you really don't have a ton of options to do. But like I said, I thought back to, the previous season, like what did I do, on the last day of the season? Well, I went back into the swamp. So come October, I think it was like October 24th or something like that, I moved directly back about, I think it was like 200 yards into the swamp. And I mean, like the swamp, so like if I can paint a picture for you, it's very open. It's like open timber, but in a swampy way. And to your left, super, super thick. I mean, like just that sagebrush and tall grass. I mean, it's just like a deer's paradise. And to your right, it's the exact same. It's, super, super thick, just tall sage. I mean, like those bushes are like 10 feet tall, and they're just, insanely hard to get through, all the way up to the field. So there's literally like 200 yards on each side, like a row. And there's this open timber, and I set up back in there, and that's where it ended up happening on November 3rd.
So take me through that week leading up to leading up to when you ended up killing him.
Mm-hmm.
What were you seeing? How many times did you get to hunt? Because you did say you're at college or back away from college. So, what was your plan? I mean, was your dad hunting? What was he seeing? Did you guys ever see this deer?
So I only saw him one time on the hoof, and that was the night I shot him. But go back to like October 23rd, 24th, when I put the stand up in there. Literally that night, the very first night, I have about a 2.5-year-old 8-point run out at about 35 yards. And this was like, I didn't see my first shooter deer until October 16th or October 17th, because I got a new rangefinder on that day. So I just remember that day seeing like I just got such a small glimpse of him. But I mean, it was a deer that was, I mean, I would say probably about 115, 120. And in Michigan, if you see that deer, I mean, that's typically a pretty good deer to, be able to harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, so like October 24th, this 8-point just comes flying out of nowhere, chasing a doe. And he runs out to 45 yards. So I quickly turn my sight to 45 and draw. And then I center it right on him. And there's a twig directly where my pin is, and I'm like, I can't do it, because I can't risk shooting a twig and having this arrow deflect, and it just wasn't worth it to me. It was a stupid shot. I mean, you can't. It's just not something you should do. When you don't have ultimate confidence in yourself to take that shot. And I ended up letting him walk up the hill. But I mean, that was the first time I came to full draw on a deer in 2017. And then a couple weeks later is when I came to full draw on that 10-point.
Okay, so take me through the days leading up to the 3rd. So what day was that? What did it fall on, like a Saturday?
It fell on a Saturday. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so
It was
did
a
you get
Saturday.
home from school on a Friday and then was like, I'm hunting all weekend? What was your plan of attack?
Yeah. So so it did fall on a Saturday. So November, it was a Friday. I always got out of class at about 12, and I had to drive 61 miles home. So I just fly home, eager to, just get out in the woods, because I knew, like, I'm like, this deer just, like, he's got to come in the daylight sometime soon. I mean, like, all the deer, like, his pattern was getting, like, he was coming in at like 7:30 at times into the field, 7:38. So he was getting, like, to the time where it's like, okay, there's possibility, like, where we can intercept him. So I fly home, and then I get everything loaded up, and I'm driving out there, and I mean, like, it's weird. Like, I don't know if you ever felt it or not, but I literally just could feel it in the air. Like, there was something good.
Yep.
Like, it was my favorite type of hunting condition. I had a southwest wind, so it was perfect for the stand. I was hunting deep in the swamp, and I could I was just driving, throughout there, and I was like, it's I just feel it. It was 39 degrees, 0 mile an hour wind, just glass. And I get out into the stand, and I'm on my phone, just, checking all, like, I check, like, barometric pressure and all that stuff. And I think it was like 33. So I was like, all right, sweet. And I don't see a single deer until 6:12. And I was just so bummed, like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I just felt it, I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, I can't believe, on this night, I'm not seeing a single deer. Like, what's going on? It's perfect conditions.
Right.
And so at 6:12, I see a doe pop out to my right at 65 yards. So I'm like, all right, so that's cool. Like, see a doe, like, all right, maybe something's following her. And then another doe pops out. And I'm like, and these are like tiny, tiny does. So I'm like, all right, I don't know if anything's really me following him or not. And then I'm just looking around. I look to my left, and I look back to my right, and I catch a glimpse of something. I throw the rangefinder up, and I just see antler. And I just see just the right antler, or his left antler just standing up. And, like, I'm instantly like, okay, shooter. So just keep this in mind, like, the entire, like, way as you go through the story. So I don't know what deer this is. I did not know this was the Big Ten that we had on camera that we were seeing the entire time. I just knew, all right, good deer, here we go. So the does are far walking down this trail at 50 yards. And this is a shot that I practice just all the time. I mean, like, literally, I'll shoot at 80 yards. I'll never shoot at 80 yards with a bow, but just 80 yards, 90 yards, just so I know I'm ready for that 40-yard, 45, 50-yard shot.
Yep.
So this deer is coming down the trail, and I range the does at 51 yards. And I'm like, all right, here we go. So I just get myself ready, draw. I got about a 7-foot window, and then he walks right through it, and then I go, man. He hears it. I center my pin right where it needs to be, and I shoot. And then he carries through on his step, and I hit him about 7 inches back. I had to shoot nocturnal knocks, and I knew exactly where I hit. At first, I was like, oh my god, like dang it, like I just, it's a little back, but I didn't think it was, crazy. So he runs 10 yards, stops. He's just standing in a thick brush for about 6 seconds, and then he darts back the way he came, and he's hunchback, like he's hurting. So I'm like, okay, that's good. Like, he's hurting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my arrow, I mean, like, the knock, it vanished into his hide. So I got full penetration. So we let him sit for about 3 hours. Or I let him sit. I was hunting by myself that night. So I let him sit for about 3 hours. I go up to my buddy's grandparents' house, and I tell him about it. I'm like, I don't know what I shot, but he's a good one. And I let him sit, and I'm thinking it over. I'm like, do we let him sit overnight? And they're like telling me, well, be careful, because there's a lot of coyotes out there.
Right.
And the coyotes are really bad in my area. I mean, like, really bad. Like, you see them all the time. So, I'm a little worried about that. So we let him sit for about 3 hours, and I go back home, and I'm like, hey, Dad, you ready to go? And we got everything all set up. So we go back out.
So just to backtrack real quick, you did you shoot this deer in the morning then?
No, I shot him at night.
Okay, at night. Okay,
at night.
Yep.
So we go back out, and I go to the exact spot I shot him, and I don't see blood. And I'm like, he was standing right here. I promise you. And my dad's like, I know he's thinking like, oh great, like, did you actually shoot him as good as you think you did? And I told him, like, I know it's back. It's about 6 inches back, 7 inches back. So he's walking around like thinking like maybe he just missed. And I'm like, no, there's no way. And then I walked to where I last saw him, and there's good blood. I mean, like, it's very easy to see. It's bright blood. You know, and I'm like, okay, here's blood. So we track him for about 50 yards, like just getting easy blood. I mean, like blood, 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 blood. And it starts getting a little heavier, and it's like blood, blood, blood. And then all of a sudden, a deer starts walking through the water. And we stop, and I'm like, Dad, do you hear that? And he's like, no, what is it? And then we go about another 5 yards, and then we both hear it. And this deer is probably 20 yards in front of us, but we can't see it. It's so thick where it's impossible to track them anymore. So I'm like, Dad, I think we really need to just back out for the night, because I'm afraid, that's him walking, and I don't know what he is. I really don't want to push him any more than we already have.
Right. Now, is he heading towards that state land?
Yes, he's in the state land at this point. He's in the that super thick stuff. It is state land.
Okay, so you're on state land now.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So we're tracking them, and then we back out. And a couple of my good friends are literally right down the road. And I stopped by his house, like he's like 2 minutes away, and I'm like, I shot something big, but I don't know what it is. And they're, everyone's telling me like, where do you think you shot him? I'm like, I know I shot him back, but it was, I knew in my mind, I'm like, this is a kill shot, but it's not what as a hunter you strive for,
It's probably a liver shot or so.
It was a liver shot. It was a liver shot, liver stomach shot. And, this was the first time I ever had to do like all this whole process of like, letting a deer sit for that long, because every deer I've shot has gone down in sight. And, looking back on it, like there was, this deer has taught me so much, as a hunter. But, so we let him sit overnight. I stayed the night at my buddy's house because he's literally 2 minutes down the road. And I come back to the property at, I think it was like 8. So I wanted to give myself some light and plenty of time, to make sure like, okay, this deer's dead. So I'm replaying everything in my head as I'm walking out, and I get back out to where, I shot him, I track the blood, everything. And I follow the bullet trail for about 30 more yards, and I find his bed. And my heart just sank because, it was, you were fine. Like the blood really just started running dry. I mean, like it was tough. And I found one little speckle of blood, and then there was his bed, and there was like a little pool of blood. And I just, I looked for, I think I said like 2 hours my post, but I mean, I didn't get out. I left at, I think 11:30, 11:45 to get a break. So I searched for about 3.5 hours on my own, and I had to take a break.
So you just started like grid searching and looking for a body, basically?
Yeah, because I just couldn't find, and it was so, like, I literally could have stepped on this deer and I would not have found him. And, that was the hard part. So I was like, in my mind, like, I know this deer's dead. Like there's, I'm thinking to myself, like, I can't let this deer just, sit and just go away. Cause I know he's somewhere close. So I ended up posting a picture on my Instagram, and I mean, like, just the support I got was it was insane. I mean, like, literally, like, I got like, it was like 1,900 people liked it, and they were like, get out there. And I got like 40 DMs from people saying like, hey, call this person. Hey, look for vultures. Hey, do like all this stuff. And one of my buddies, like, I didn't know this at the time. So like, I'm driving down the road, and I tell one of my good friends, who's also a pretty diehard hunter. He's like, call Michigan Deer Trackers. And I was like, who? And he's like, there's a guy, and he's from Fowlerville, and he's really good at tracking deer. And so I'm like, all right. So I go to McDonald's. I'm really sitting in the McDonald's parking lot. I give him a call, and he's like, yeah, I just got done tracking a deer like 45 minutes ago. Where you at? And I'm like, well, my property's right off of, blank road. And he's like, all right, yeah, I'll meet you there in like 45 minutes. And so like, I'm all excited again. Like, I can't, like, I'm like, okay, there's hope. You know, like we're gonna find this deer. Like there's a glimmer of hope. And you know, I didn't even eat anything. I literally just like threw everything. So I was out of the woods for about 45 minutes. I mean, like I literally drove down the road to the bank and then back. And so we get there, I get there and I'm sitting there for about 25 minutes. And then he gets there and we drive out to the back, you know, where the property is, or right before the field. And then, you know, we get out and he's talking to me. He has to do like a whole bunch of, I guess like they have to do he's registered through, I believe it's something where the deer tracker, they have to just do something.
Okay.
It was some process I just didn't know about. And, you know, I'm asking him, so what are the chances we find this deer? And he's like, well, the national average is 27%. And I'm like, oh, great. Like, this isn't going to, I was like, well, here we go. And then he's like, but I'm a little better. I got like 34%. So I'm like, all right, 34 is better than 27.
Yep.
Like,
I'll take that.
I'll take it. Like whatever helps out. And so we go out there, and as soon as he sets his dog down right where I shot, the dog starts going, just tracking it exactly as the deer ran. Like it was amazing. I mean, I've never witnessed anything like it. And he's just tracking it. So he goes like literally like I said, like where I shot him, about 10 yards, and then he goes through the brush exactly, you know, where I saw his deer, and he's following the blood trail real well. And I'm astounded. I'm like, I can't believe it. Like he's actually onto the deer. So we get to where I last found blood, and I'm like, all right, so this is where I last saw it. And he's like, okay. And we start going through this just super thick stuff. And I in my mind, like, I'm not seeing any blood. So I'm like, how is this dog finding stuff? Like we're walking through, I mean, literally 2 feet of water, 1.5 feet of water. And like I said, it's a lake. It's literally a lake that you have to get to.
Yep.
To get to the property. Like we're literally walking through this lake.
So have you already made it past his bed and basically where you had stopped?
Yeah, so where I last found blood was where his bed was.
Okay.
And then I grid searched, like, you know, that area for, you know, 3.5 hours.
So this dog basically ran right to the bed and just kept going like he's still on it.
And just kept going. Yeah, he kept going to this and I can see in the distance, it's about maybe 200 yards away. No, not that far. About 100 yards away, there's this island. And I'm like, is he taking us to this deer right now? So we're walking through this like just insanely thick stuff. I mean, it was a nightmare to like go through. And you know, we start going, he's like, blood. And I'm like, I'm like, you're finding blood? And I'm like, yeah, it's right here. And he's shocked at his dog. He's like, I can't believe he's actually finding blood in this, because we're literally going through like 2 feet of water. And he's, you know, just like this is good. And then we start finding like parts of his like insides.
Holy cow.
And I think like literally, and it's on my Instagram, I've posted a picture of it. It's why I shoot, you know, like rage broadheads is why I shoot the hypodermic, for just his giant cutting diameter and, you know, just the accuracy I get with it. And like we're literally finding like his insides as we're walking. And I'm like, and I'm feeling terrible at this point, like as a hunter, like, you know, you want to make the first, you know, cleanest kill possible.
Right.
And I'm afraid like, oh my God, did the coyotes get him? Like that was my biggest fear, because I don't want a deer to die like that. It's just, you know, that's just a terrible way to go. And we're walking, and then we get to the land, and we started finding like giant pools of blood. And keep in mind, I have no idea like what deer I've shot. Like I do not know what I have shot. I do not know. That is the big 10 point. So we get to the land, and we find like two like just giant piles of, you know, blood. Like I don't know if he just like was standing there and he just bled, like, you know, just a blood clot opened up or something, and he just poured it. And we find 2 of those about 10 yards apiece. And then he goes forward a little more, and then the dog just starts going berserk. And I'm like, what is it? And then he's like, holy crap, there's your deer. And I'm like, are you serious right now? And he's like, yeah, it's big. And I'm like, okay, where is it? I don't see it. And I do not see this deer. I do not know where he is, because I'm behind him a little bit. And then he's like, he starts staring at it for a second. He's like, it's still alive. And I'm like, you're kidding me right now. Like, this deer is still alive. And he's like, he literally says like, I can't believe it. But like, yes, I just saw him move a little bit. And I'm like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. So go back 45 minutes now. he tells me, when I asked him, like, like, should I bring my bow? He's like, no, don't bring it because we're not going to need it. Either this deer's going to be alive or we're going to find him dead. And I'm like, okay. So I leave it sitting, right by my tree stand in the woods. So I have to sprint all the way back to my bow. He's like, well, first before I do that, he's like, do you have a knife? And I'm like, no, because I was planning on grabbing all this stuff, once I, got all my stuff. And like, if I would have put a backpack on, I literally would have lost everything. It just would have got snagged up on, limbs and everything like that. So I take off sprinting through all of this thick crap and stuff like that, tripping in the water. I mean, I'm soaking wet and it's like 40 degrees. And I'm just, just going for it. And then I finally get back to my bow about 30 minutes later.
Literally 30 minutes?
I got lost. I literally got lost in the woods. So I get back to where it was because I didn't know. I mean, it's so thick. It's so hard to get through. I mean, it's a zigzag, and I was really walking through 3 feet of water at times. Like, not even kidding. And my phone is at 2%. I didn't charge it because I was at my friend's house. I did not charge it. I didn't have an electronic charger. I didn't have a car charger. I didn't have any of that. So I'm looking on my phone. I'm like, oh my God, I should have marked it before I left. Took off running would have been the smart thing, but my just like, young creative or young excited self just, took off. And that was another, 30 minutes till I got back. And then I finally get back to him and, he's like, he's still there, just be ready. I'm like, okay, here's my rangefinder. He's like, oh, you're not going to need it because you're going to have to like walk up on him. And I still have not seen the deer. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he is. I don't know. Like, I don't know any of it.
So wait a second. So you left the guy, the tracker, to go get your bow, and it took you 30 minutes to get back to your bow because you got lost.
Yes, because I could not. It was just so thick, and I got lost in the woods. I had no service, so I had to like play off sense and where I thought like exactly where the woods were.
So then, so you grab your bow and then you go back to him. How long did that take to get back to him?
That was worse. That was about 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes.
So you've been gone for an hour.
I've been gone for an hour walking through this. Like, literally, I'm walking through 3 feet of water in the middle of this lake, just trying to get back because I don't know where he is exactly because it just looks so dang similar. Like, there's like 3 islands, and then he has to whistle to me, and I have to just go off a sound. I finally get back to him.
That's crazy.
And then I know. I mean, it was just unreal how it all unfolded.
So you get back to him, and then
so I get back to him, and then I still don't see the deer. Like, I'm like, all right, I got, I knock an arrow. I'm looking for him, and all of a sudden I see a little bit of his tail. I see some white, and I'm like, okay, there he is. And then he's like, you got to get up on him. He's got to put it right in his heart. And I was like, okay, because obviously you just have to put it down as cleanly and quick as possible. And I'm walking up to him, and this deer's not moving. Like, I'm like, is he dead? And I just see you just take a small breath, and I end up just walking up, put it right in the heart, and it was over in 5 seconds. And I mean, I can't tell you just how terrible I felt. Like, you'd think like after like that, you'd be like, oh my God, like I just shot the big 10 point. I mean, to me, it was like I mean, this deer was a warrior, is all I can really say. I mean, just like the will for it to, try to stay alive. And I mean, I felt terrible that I couldn't just, put it down as quickly, as cleanly as possible. And, but once like everything was done, I was like, I told him, the whole story. I was like, I've had pictures of this deer since October 18th. And I told him, like, I had no idea what he was, when I shot him. And, once I got up to him, I was like, it was exciting. I mean, of course, I was like, oh my God, like we just shot our, our number 1 hit lister. And yeah. I mean, it was an incredible experience. I mean, like, it taught me, just so much as a hunter. And, I mean, it was unreal. And then, the story doesn't even end there. I mean, it took me 6 hours to drag him out of the woods. The guy had to leave. So I was on my own with no GPS. So I told him, can you please just like take my bow and can you just mark a trail, for me to get out so I don't get lost? And he did that. And I ended up I recovered him at 12:45, and the last time I looked at my phone when I got out of the woods, it was 7:58. So I
Holy
mean,
cow.
I mean, I think it was 6 hours in the woods. I mean, it was just unreal. I mean, 6, 7 hours in the woods, just dragging them. And it was, it rained that day, November 4th, it rained. So I was literally there with no water, no food. I just had to drag him. I mean, I'd go like literally 4 yards at a time and had to set him down. I'd drag him over branches. And I mean, he dressed out at 222 pounds. So
Wow, so he was a big deer.
yeah, he had a good body on him. So
Yeah, but
then,
that makes for one hell of a story. I'll tell you, man. That's
oh,
really
for
cool. That's
sure.
something you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt.
Yeah. So and then what'd you say you end up scoring too?
I scored him at 138 and 2/8. Rough
Okay.
score.
Yep.
Yep. I didn't, if I want to get some trophy tape on him, so I haven't done that yet, but that'll give me the most accurate score for sure, probably.
Did you end up getting him aged or anything?
No, I did not get him aged. Well, the taxidermist said he thought he was about 4 years old,
Okay.
where I take him to. He's like, yeah, this is probably like a 4.5 year old deer. Because, I mean, his teeth were, they were gnawed down to where he thought, okay, probably around there. But,
Yeah.
no, not officially. He's not officially aged.
I gotcha. He's either 3 or 4, probably somewhere right in there.
For sure. I would
Yeah.
imagine so.
Well, that's cool, man. That's
Yeah.
one of the more crazier stories I've ever heard, and this is honestly the first time I heard it. Because you and I talked yesterday, and I got some Cliff Notes version. So
Yeah. So this is the first time of like, to everyone that's gonna listen. That's how the story went down. And I couldn't thank everyone that wanted me to find this deer. I mean, it was amazing. Like all the people that were, do this and just, I mean, the power of social media just was crazy in
it
that
is,
sense.
man.
And just gave me so much confidence. And that's when, a lot of people found the page, and, I was able to gain quite a few followers from it. And, but sadly, the story doesn't really end there.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. So I get them all cleaned up and everything, get them out of the woods. So the next morning, I take them to the butcher, and there's like, I mean, I got like 8 people around me, and I'm, telling the story and everything. And, so there's 2 butchers. So keep this in mind. So butcher number 1, butcher number 2. So butcher number 1 comes out, and he's looking at, he's like, nice deer. And he's like, and I'm like, yeah, thanks. And, I'm telling him about the story and everything. And then he goes in, he smells it, and he's like, I can't take it. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's got a little bit of a smell to it. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is unreal. Like, this isn't happening. So then he was like, hey, butcher number 2, come out. And so this guy comes out, and he's like, well, I just smell wet deer. Because, I mean, I drag this thing through literally 2 feet of water.
Right.
I mean, like, this thing is soaking wet. He's like, I just smell wet deer. And I guess butcher number one had the authority on it. And he's like, I can't take it. And I'm like, are you serious right now? Like, he's saying he smells wet deer. You're saying you smell a little bit of smell to it. And like, there's other people around. Like, I mean, I'm just like this is so much meat that is going to feed us that we just love. I mean, we eat deer meat all the time, like we always have it, with everything.
Yep.
And he ends up saying, I can keep it for you. That's all I can do. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I'm like, all right, well, if you say so, then go ahead and do that. But, so I go home and I take a nap, and I'm just furious, like, like I can't get any of this meat. Cause I mean, like, by all means, like, I mean, I love big antlers, and like, every hunter does, like, you strive to get, like, want to kill the biggest deer possible. But in the end, a lot of Michigan hunters and a lot of people, honestly, just about every single hunter, does it for the meat as well.
Right.
And, and that's, that's a giant thing to me. And so I take a nap for like 2.5 hours, and I come back and I get the cape. And so butcher number 2 is there, and he's like, hey, I got your cape. And I'm like, all right, thank you. And then he says this, which just infuriated me. And he's like, I'm gonna be honest with you, man, you could probably eat this deer. And I'm like, so why did you say, you can't take it? He's like, well, that guy, he has authority over me. So, I really can't do anything, about it. And I was like, I mean, I just, I was so mad and upset because, I just couldn't get a straight answer. And I had a very hard time believing that even if a portion of it wasn't, good, that,
Right.
like I still couldn't get like this, like this part of the deer. And so, I mean, it was very, I was very upset about that for, probably honestly, like the rest of the deer season. I mean, I was very bitter about it.
I've
So
never heard that from any butcher before ever.
I know I
You know,
couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
we
So, I mean,
we process a lot of our own deer. That's how my dad always done it.
we've done that. We've done that a couple times.
Yeah, and it is a undertaking, but you can get a
For
get
sure.
a good Saturday with a football game on and
For
get
sure.
it done and everything. But it is pretty convenient to take to a butcher as well. But man, I don't know if I'd ever be going back to that butcher
No,
again.
I literally said I mean, I really just I told the worst part was I had to tell the landowner, and they love deer meat and they love their deer out there. And I told them, I'm like, they just told me, I told them a little bit over the phone or over a text that we can't have the deer, and they were just, they were devastated about it. And they were like, I felt so bad because I was like, oh my God, like, these people, like, like we were promising, like, well, yeah, I'll make sure I give you some meat for sure. And,
Right.
Obviously we couldn't do that. And then, I told them the whole story, about it in person not too long after. And they're like, you should go to this butcher instead because, even if the portion of the deer isn't, right, then, they'll still do, this part for you. They'll try to make you the most. So, I mean, it was very stressful. It was a very stressful, emotional 2 days. And then, obviously once I found out I can't have the meat, I was pretty disappointed and upset about that for, literally the rest of deer season. So
Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's too bad. Now, were you kind of in a position where you couldn't, do it all yourself, like process it
no,
yourself?
I couldn't take it. Oh, you mean like could I have? Like
Yeah.
if once I shot it?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, if you
Oh, like
if
you mean
you
could I have gotten it back?
yeah, if you like, so the butcher said you couldn't have it. He wasn't going to let you take the deer,
To my knowledge, no. I mean,
so you couldn't even have took it home and butch it to yourself.
to my knowledge, they just caped it out and they did whatever with it. I mean, they could have ate it for all I know.
Holy cow,
So I mean,
that's
it
a
was
different
just
story.
so I mean, I know. So like, I've made it like where I wanted, like in just in this deer because I don't know what else you're gonna do like this in Michigan. It's tough. I mean, I've hunted for 10 years and I've only seen a deer of that caliber one or two other times, and you know, and it was when I first started hunting cold water. That's where I saw the first two big deer like that. And I know the property, like yeah, like it shows there's other big deer out there, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily gonna get them. So I don't know
Right.
when the next time I'll be able to do that. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I get this deer, registered with Pope and Young, and get a plaque for him to go right next to it. Because I mean, I think just it was just a warrior with buck, and it's a lot of
Yeah.
people say like, oh, hunters, like they just kill deer and they don't care about them.
Right.
Well, I definitely care about my deer. I mean, it's a memory that's gonna last forever, and it's gonna hang on my wall forever. So
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely want to have the most memories I can have of this deer, and so
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend
that
that
was the whole
butcher to
story.
anybody if I were you.
No, I wouldn't either. I'm not gonna say who it was or anything like that, but it was we've butchered multiple deer through them, and they've always done a good job, and this happens, and it's just unreal how it all unfortunately played out in the end.
That's unbelievable. They wouldn't even give the deer back to you so you could
No.
take it home and butcher it. I'll
Yeah.
bet you they took that deer and probably processed it up and probably took it home for themselves, probably.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, it's a whole store, so I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they're selling parts of that deer to just people. Like I mean, it was very stressful, and
Unbelievable, man.
I just infuriating. I mean, I just couldn't believe it, and I didn't talk about it. I never talked about it, through social media. But I mean, it's really one of those things where you kind of have to like talk about because you really just can't, text all that into a post.
Right.
But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it was just a like I said, like this deer taught me so much, as a hunter. And, just the experience like of all of this is just, it's going to impact my hunting for the rest of my life, and just the knowledge I learned and how I hunt deer now, at least on this property. It's, I mean, I'm looking forward to this year. It's going to be an awesome year. I can tell already, but
Awesome. Well, man, I want to thank you for coming on, and I congratulate you immensely. You did everything you possibly could to get back on that deer, and and you worked your tail off for it, and you earned that buck for sure. It's too bad that it had to end with a butcher like that. That's just terrible, but
I know.
That's just crazy. So
yeah.
But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on here. We're up over an hour here, and it's getting kind of late. I wanna cut you loose here. And
no, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out, having me on. So
no problem, man. Maybe this year you'll top that, and we'll have to do another one of these this time next year.
For sure. I'm looking. I gear for sure, as long as I can get one.
Well, cool, man. Well, hey, we'll stay in touch, and I'll let you know when all this comes out. And again, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thank you very much for having me.
And there it is, a pretty interesting podcast from Brandon Leon. That story goes down for me anyway. It's one of the crazier ones I've ever really heard, and I'm glad I had Brandon on. He's a really good guy, and he killed a great deer, but that butcher, like, I just don't understand. Like, I've never heard of anybody doing that, and I just can't fathom that. And for him to not even offer up the deer, to give the deer back to Brandon and have him go home and process it himself, that's just blows my mind. But there are some pretty crazy people out there, and I just don't get it. So that's going to wrap up this week. I appreciate everybody's support. You guys are helping this podcast grow like crazy. I hope everybody's enjoying it. We are on Castbox. It's an app you can get for an iPhone or an Android. We're on Google Play, and we're also on the podcast app on iPhone and iTunes. So if you could go to any of those platforms, apps, or whatever, and just leave some reviews, that really helps in the ratings for the fall podcast, and really helps us boost up. And you guys are doing great right now. There are some ratings and everything on the iTunes one, and I just appreciate you guys doing that. So go there and leave some reviews and everything. And coming up here, I do want to do some sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily a Q&A, or I want you guys to send in some questions, and I'll have some people on here, and we'll do kind of a BS session and answer all those questions as well. I think it'd be a really cool podcast. And other than that, again, I appreciate it, and don't forget the white gold giveaway. I'm going to be announcing a winner on the Instagram and Facebook pages on this Friday. So 2 days from now, there will be a random winner selected, and I will let everybody know who won. So don't forget about that. 2 days from now, Friday, August 10th, I will be announcing a winner for the white gold giveaway. So thanks for listening, and don't forget, next Wednesday is an all-new episode of the Fall Podcast. Thanks, guys.